Hello and welcome back to the caves, everybody. Welcome back to Deep Rock Galactic Survivor, where today we're going to be talking about all of the artifacts and we're going to be ranking them here in our tier list, which we have quite a few interesting categories where we have the bottom tier, which is the last pick. This is probably going to be the things that you want to avoid or things that you grab at the very end if there's nothing else that you really want. Then we have situational, can be good, might not be so good, depends on the situation. We'll talk about them. B tier, because I thought it was funny just to have a B tier in the middle of this. Rock solid, something that's usually pretty good. And then we've got Karl's choice, which is the top tier artifacts in my opinion. The artifacts vary heavily in terms of how good they are based on how you're playing, what class you're playing, and also what the biome is you're playing in, or whatever other modifiers you have. Is this a class challenge? Is this a weapon challenge? Is this a biome mastery challenge? Is this the weekly challenges? Is it one of the mutator rounds, in which case some of these could be a whole lot better than others, but this will just be my rough thoughts on each of them. So first up, we've got the ammo rig. Ammo rig is epic rarity, so they don't show up super often. This gives you 50% faster rate of fire with all of your weapons, but minus 15% to your movement speed. This one can be actually pretty good. This one's going to go up into rock solid because on most builds, usually higher rate of fire is better. Not necessarily all builds. If you're going like sharpshooter scout, you can go M1000 into thick boy and then get like the double barrel also into thick boy, and then reload speed matters a whole lot more than rate of fire. But on like pretty much any gunner build, this one's pretty nice, or NG build, this one's pretty nice. So long as this doesn't slow you down too much, then it's going to be good. You're going to have to make that call depending on how much speed you actually want to have on your dwarf though. Generally the higher speed the better, but if you don't need to move a whole lot, like maybe you go full turret NG, the higher rate of fire is good and you're not really lacking much in movement speed besides just having to walk yourself to the drop pod at the very end. Up next we have Ancient Knowledge, which Ancient Knowledge immediately gives you 3 levels. This one I'm going to put in situational because this one, if you get it in like the first stage or the second stage, you're probably not really going to need it. 3 more levels at a low level, especially if you get this and you're like level 8 or something, it's not going to matter. If you get this way later on into the match, like towards the very end, and this one can actually be pretty decent because it has 3 additional levels. It could potentially get you to another overclock. If you're close to getting your final overclock, your unstable overclock with your weapon, then this one can be good to pick. But early on, there's generally better options than just taking this one, I found. So it's not bad. I still will take it from time to time, but it's not usually one I prioritize unless it's like later on into the match. Then we've got Armor Grease. So Armor Grease increases your dodge chance by 2% when you're moving. This stacks up to 5 times. Armor Grease is generally pretty decent. I think I'd put Armor Grease up into B tier. It's not always necessary, but just having the chance of dodging an attack is good. It's just you may not want to prioritize this over some of the other artifacts. Some of the other ones can be better than this, but potentially just not taking damage is really, really good. Even if it's just like floor fire damage, that can still be kind of nice and can still add up a little bit, especially if you're playing it with Recon Scout, where dodge also boosts your movement speed after that. And this one's actually quite good on Recon Scout. It's pretty good on everybody, though. Just not getting hit is generally pretty nice. Then we've got the Barley Bulb Juice. This one lets you gain temporary movement speed buff after sitting still. This is 5% movement speed for 3 seconds. This stacks up to 5 times. This one I'm going to put into the last pick. Generally, I don't go for the Barley Bulb Juice. I just find that it's not that necessary. If you get this early on, you probably don't want to take it because movement speed isn't as good as like damage. It's not as good as potentially like another weapon or some of these other things like increased rate of fire, increased dodge chance. They're probably just going to save you more. This one's not bad if you go with like full turret NG though, and you already have all of your other stuff, and then you just want to grab this because you're planning on sitting still because maybe you've got the pop-up turret. So in which case you're fine, and then you can use this just to run to the drop pod at the end. It's not going to be a bad one because you're still probably going to get use out of this throughout a mission because there's plenty of points where you might stand still for a second or two, and you'll get a little burst of speed from that, so that's pretty nice. Up next we've got the BLT Ration Pack. This one's pretty great. This one gives you plus 70 more maximum HP, and it gives you plus 2 life regen. This one's really good on anybody. So long as the challenge allows you to heal, then this one's going to be Karl's choice because extra health and extra regen is going to be great on everybody. You pretty much always want to be at high HP. It's okay to lose HP throughout this game. That's not a big deal. But making sure that you're just less likely to die is one of the major parts of DRG Survivor. So this one is always going to be like a top pick, especially if you get it early on, because more survivability with anybody is really, really nice. And it's really good later on too, because it just gives you a massive health buff, pretty much equivalent to, I believe it's an uncommon and a legendary health buff on top of one another. Plus you get extra health regen from that. And then we've got the burning and the freezing belts. I'm going to put these into the last picks too, because even though these can be good in certain situations, I would say the freeze belt's a little bit better than the fire belt. They're definitely not choices that I go for right away. They are rare, so they do pop up a whole lot more than some of the other options, and you barely need to do anything to unlock these, so that's pretty cool. You will get access to these pretty early on. They do keep enemies away, and if you freeze enemies around you, there's a good chance you can run through them afterwards so that they don't hurt you. So the freeze belt can get you out of bad situations, but these are usually like some of the last things that I go for. If I'm going for them at all, I just find that some of the other options are a little bit better. Then we got the chemistry set. This one gives you more potency and more status effect damage. This one I would say is situational. This one totally depends on your build. If you're going with like interrogator driller, then this one's pretty good because you're pretty much guaranteed to have nothing but elements. And if you're so far into the stage that all of your weapons have elements, or 3 out of your 4 weapons, or maybe even 4 out of your 5 weapons, or all 5 weapons already have elements, then this one is just going to be a general buff to it. I don't think it's a crazy buff. It's not one of the highest damaging buffs, but it is still a buff overall, so it's still pretty good. Clipboard of Grudges makes it so you gain XP whenever you take damage. This one I'm going to put in last pick as well. This one is okay because you're likely going to be taking damage all throughout the mission. So early on this isn't too bad, but later on the extra XP you gain just really isn't worth it all that much. And I would rather have things like the Golden Nitra Scanner over something like this for similar passive buffs that I'm going to be getting throughout the mission. I usually don't find that this makes that much of a difference overall, as opposed to skipping this, going for potentially a more damaging or a quality of life artifact, and then potentially just going for the next like XP upgrade that I see. Then we've got the company issued magnet. This one spawns a magnet at the end of a mission, and the magnet pulls in half of the total XP that's around the map. This one is probably also going to go into last pick. It's not really a bad option, and I get these pretty often from like the Huli Hoarders. So if you get them from there, they're actually pretty good because you're at least getting something at the end of the mission, and it's pretty unreasonable for you to actually like run around the whole map again to get all of your XP before you kill the bosses. So there will likely be XP. You still will get a bonus from this. If you get a magnet on the board, then that would be better because that will grab 100% of the XP. But this one's okay to be grabbing XP at the very end, but I usually don't prioritize it. It's mostly just a thing if it pops up from a Huli Hoarder or something that I find and they didn't have anything better, then I'll take like the company magnet, and I'm not going to really be disappointed. It's kind of nice to get this thing early on too. Then we've got the Diver's Manual. The Diver's Manual gives you plus 10% damage, plus 10% reload speed, plus 5% crit chance, and plus 15% crit damage. This one's good. I'm going to put it up in rock solid because this is going to be good on pretty much every build. Every build enjoys all of these things because pretty much every build can benefit from all of them, assuming that you don't already have like maxed out crit chance. But, I mean, more damage is always going to be good, more reload speed is always going to be good, and more crit damage is always going to be good. Those stats just pretty much infinitely scale, whereas crit chance technically does infinitely scale, but it doesn't matter once you go over 100% because you're just going to be guaranteed crits at that point. So maybe if you're at 100% crit chance, this one isn't as good, but it's still pretty decent. Then we've got the DRG coupons. DRG coupons are quite good. This gets you 20% discount at every shop. And if you get these early on, I would say that they are rock solid. If you get them later on, they're probably going to be like B tier because you're likely not going to be getting as much value out of them. But if you can get this in like the first or second stage, you are really good to go because you're going to get so much extra value in between those stages of just getting more upgrades for your weapon or more upgrades for yourself. And like the coupons are fantastic. If you get it into like wave 3 or 4, it's okay at that point. It's still going to be a bonus. You're generally still going to get a few more upgrades than you otherwise would. If you get it into like maybe into the end stage of 4, or worse, if you get it into like stage 5, it probably doesn't do anything, assuming that you're not going with like the biome master and you have 10 rounds, in which case then this one becomes even better if you get this early on. Then it probably would be Karl's choice in that setting, but in most other settings, I'm going to say it's rock solid. And then we got energy bars. Energy bars makes it so you gain 1% more damage, but you lose 2 more max HP per level that you go up. So you're squishier, but you do more damage. 1% more damage is still pretty decent, especially once you're getting up to level 50, 60, 70. 50 to 60 to 70% more damage is good, especially since you're going to be scaling higher and higher up with that. This one is a little bit awkward to get early on though, because you're not going to be getting that much more damage from it. I mean, you could still get like 20% more damage within the first wave, or even higher than that in some instances. But it does take down your health and it makes you a little bit squishier. So energy bars, I think I'm going to put maybe into B tier, but they're probably on the very high end of B tier, maybe into rock solid. They're definitely rock solid later on if you already know your build, and if you've managed to grab a bunch of healing items or health related upgrades, then like these ones are fantastic. Then we've got both the gold and the nitra scanner, and these ones do pretty much the same thing, where every time that you mine through rock, there's a chance that you get gold or nitra from mining them. Both these are pretty decent. They're not bad at all. I'd probably put them both up into B tier. They're not necessarily ones that I always go for, but if you get them early on, they can get you a lot of value, especially since you can get multiple of these. And if you're doing a run as like Foreman Driller, where you just drill through the walls really quick, or if you get the new pickaxe, you can get through the walls fairly fast. You can actually get a decent amount of value from this. Even more so if you get like one of these on the second stage, you got DRG coupons on the first stage. You can just go on a spending spree in between the rounds and get so many more upgrades. So even though you don't necessarily have any more damage or survivability, you're just going to get more naturally because of all the deals that you're going to be getting. Up next, we have the gold tipped bullets. These ones increase your damage by 1% for every 5 gold that you have. Gold is pretty common, and it's not unusual for you to have 100 or up to maybe 200 per round, assuming that you're spending it in between rounds and you're not hoarding the gold, in which case then you could potentially get even more. So I mean, in a lot of cases, you're getting like 100 gold, divide that by 5, you're getting 20% more damage. If you go up to 200, which is kind of on the high end for a particular mission, maybe you get a golden loot bug or something like that, then you're going up to 40% damage. That's still quite good for the stage, and this is always going to be an upgrade for pretty much every build, and then you can choose to either build from it, or you can choose to kind of ignore it and then just build it up throughout the mission. So I'm going to put this one into rock solid. Usually I go for the gold tipped rounds. They get you a decent amount of damage. Then we've got the multi-tool. Multi-tool gives you minus 25% reload speed, but then it gives you 5% reload speed per every unique tag that you have. So this one is worded a little bit strange. This one can be pretty good. It depends on when you get this. Minus 25% reload speed is pretty bad. That is a pretty big nerf. But this makes it so every weapon has potentially more reload speed if you branch out and get a bunch of different weapons. So the tags that it's referring to would be things like projectile, light weapons, spraying weapons, element, whatever that has on it, heavy weapon. And if you have enough variety to those tags, then you're going to be getting 5% per each one of them. Generally, each weapon has about 3 or 4 tags on it, I think. So generally with like 2 weapons, you're going to be at least breaking even on this, assuming that you didn't just all stack into one type of weapon. And then after that, if you have 4 vastly different weapons, like let's say you have a grenade, you have a heavy weapon, you've got a pistol, and then you've got some sort of elemental weapon or something like that, there's a good chance that you're going to get a lot of value from this, and you're going to get a pretty big boost. Even more so if you get like the weapons crate, which could get you a 5th weapon, you could get even more options then. So this one can be really good, but if you get it early on when you only have 1 or 2 weapons, this one can actually be a downgrade overall. So I'm going to put this one in situationally good, but generally it is pretty nice. And then we've got the nitrogenic powder. This one increases your crit chance by 0.5% for every nitro that you have. Just like gold tipped bullets, this one is really solid. It gets you a lot more damage. Assuming that you don't already have maxed out crit chance, then this one is just going to be a buff. So I'm going to put this one up into rock solid as well. It's very straightforward, but it's very good. Then we've got the pay to win console. Pay to win console continuously drains 50 gold every 50 seconds, but increases your damage by 100%. This one, again, can be really good. It generally depends on when you get this. Are you getting this on the final round where there's boss wave, in which case then this one is amazing? Or are you getting this like the very first round where you can run yourself out of gold, kind of have a slower game, especially if you don't find a whole bunch of gold going into the next stages, and you may not be able to buy upgrades or reroll for the next stages. Pay to win console, I'm going to put in situational. It's generally pretty good, especially if you can get it on like stage 4 of 5 or on stage 5 of 5. I would say go for it then, because you're going to get a lot of value out of it. You've probably already got a decent amount of artifacts up to that point. If you're getting this offered like stage 1, maybe stage 2, you might not want to go for it. And then on like stage 3 of 5, you might just have to make a call then. If you're going on longer missions that are like 10 rounds, Depends again when you get it. If you're getting it later on, awesome. If you're getting it early on, maybe skip it for a bit. Then we have our piercing projectiles. This one gives you plus 50% more piercing. That's pretty good. 50% more piercing on anything. I'm going to put it up into B tier. This isn't crazy, but it gets you more damage with all of your weapons just punching through enemies. So most of the time this is going to be pretty good. It depends on your setup. If you're going like full interrogator driller and you have all the, ground fire and all the sludge in the world, it's not going to really matter too much. It'll still matter on the direct hits. Then we've got Pickled Nitra. Pickled Nitra increases your damage by 2%, but decreases your movement speed by 0.5% for every Nitra that you have. Pickled Nitra is really hard to kind of judge because on one hand, it can be absolutely devastating. You get like 100 Nitra, you mow down everything with it, and then you can't get to the drop pod because you're moving too slow. If you manage to build up a lot of movement speed or build up movement speed throughout the game and keep your Nitra at just the right level, like maybe you're going for 50, you've got enough movement speed to get maybe up to like 10% or a little bit more than that, it's going to be really good. It's going to feel really nice. But if you get this one at an awkward time where it gets you a lot more damage and allows you to save the round, you might legitimately not be able to run to the drop pod. That has happened to me before, so I think I have to put Pickled Nitra into situational, but again, it's a generally pretty good artifact to get. Pop-up turret increases your rate of fire by 2% and your reload speed by 2% whenever you're standing still, and this can stack up to 15 times. This one is potentially really strong. It depends on the build that you're going for, though. If you're going for like a scout build where you're running around a lot, it's probably not going to be that great. If you're going with a turret Ingi build, it's fantastic and you always want it. So this one varies quite a bit. I think I'd put it into B tier because generally it's an upgrade, and there's going to be points where you do stand still for a second or two and you get a little bit better reload speed and rate of fire out of this. You can also kind of wait a second, move, wait a second, move, wait a second, move, and then you'll keep your stacks this way too. That can be pretty good into the later rounds. Into the early rounds, this might be not so good because generally you want to be mining up as much nitro and gold as you can so that way you can buy stuff later on. And then we've got the red sugar cube. This one makes it so you get 2 more max HP every time that you collect red sugar. You have this unlocked by default. This just gets you more survivability in the long run. This is better if you can get it early on, but I usually don't prioritize this one over quite a few of the other artifacts. It's pretty good for just being it unlocked at the early game, so if you don't have any other artifacts, this one's nice. But I would still probably put this one into like last pick for me, but it's probably at the top end of last pick. I would rather have this than most of these other ones down here, just because I know I'm going to get some value from it. Then we've got the Reflex Calibrator. The Reflex Calibrator makes it so whenever you take damage, there's an increased chance that you dodge. This one is okay. I'm going to put it into like B tier. It's not really as good as like Armor Grease for just giving you increased dodge chance when you're moving. You can stack these and you have even more dodge chance then, and that's kind of nice. And every once in a while, this one will keep you alive. It's happened to me plenty of times. So I can't really say that it's bad, but I don't find myself taking it super often. Then we've got the pretzel. The pretzel is really good. The salty pretzel increases your armor by 1 for every 2% HP missing. This is really good because that means the longer the round goes and the more damage that you take, the more tanky you'll be. And if you have a high amount of maximum HP, then this one will also scale just as well, since it scales off of your total percent health. So you can potentially survive even longer if you want to build more HP. The pretzel is pretty much like Karl's choice. It's another really good artifact to get. Then we have the squint eyes, the spider eyes as I like to call them. These goggles give you 30% more crit chance and 100% more crit damage, but minus 30% overall damage. These ones are really good because everything in the game can crit. Even like damage over time things can crit. So even on like Interrogator Driller, this can be pretty good. And generally this is going to be an upgrade to your build in the long run. It might nerf your damage a little bit at the very start if you only have like one weapon and you get this. Especially if you don't have high crit chance. If you're on like Sharpshooter Scout, this one's going to be generally just a straight upgrade to your build because all you do is hit crits. So I'm going to put this one up into Karl's choice as well. It's generally quite good to grab. The mocap increases your damage by 1% for every 1% of HP that you're missing. This one can also be pretty good because if you get beat up quite a lot, especially if you have the pretzel where it's giving you armor, then you're less likely to die because you're taking less damage after that from each hit, and this gets you more damage on each of your hits. So the mocap, I would say, is going to be in rock solid. It can be kind of situationally good too. It just depends. If you get this early on, it can be really nice. If you get it later on, it can also be decent because you never know how much damage you're suddenly going to take, and just buffing up your damage so that you can get through the round quicker is generally going to be nice. Then we got Vitaminers, which did get buffed. These ones actually give you more HP overall, and they also make it so every time that you level up, you get more HP than you otherwise would. That's pretty good. They were already fairly good before this, just because it kept you alive a lot longer, especially into the early game. They're still pretty nice in the early game. We did get more artifacts now, so they are a little bit weaker just because of the competition. But I would still say that they're like high up into B tier. They're probably one of the more common rare ones that I go for. That's kind of weird to say. They're one of the more common upgrades that I do go for. And then we've got the XP scanner. This one is kind of just worse than the other scanners here. Whenever you're digging through walls, you get XP, or you have a chance of getting XP. This is very similar to like the clipboard of grudges, where the XP gain can be kind of nice, but generally you're not getting tons of extra levels from this, maybe a level or two throughout the entire game. And that's fine, or it can be fine, it depends. Usually I don't go for it though. I would also put this one in the last pick, because I would rather have the other scanners over this particular scanner. And then we have the Turbo Incubator. This one gives you 3% more damage and 3% more reload speed, but minus 5% mining speed for every equipped overclock that you have on your weapons. So if you have 4 weapons and they are all maxed out on overclocks, that's going to be 12. Assuming that you didn't get the weapon box and also maxed out that weapon, in which case then that could go all the way up to 15, because you'd have 5 weapons and 3 overclocks for each weapon. This one again is kind of situational. The mining speed is not really that great. You don't want to be lowering your mining speed by that much, because that is a pretty important part of the game. It allows you to actually rotate pretty well. And if you don't have fast mining speed, then this one can potentially get you killed. It has gotten me killed in the past. But it also depends on what build you have, because if you have like the coil gun with mining on it and you have like 6 shots coming out of it, it generally clears up rocks super fast, faster than you can mine most of the time. In that case, it can actually be quite good. Just depends on the build, and it depends on when you get this one. Early on, I find this one to be a little bit awkward. Up next, we got the weapon box. The weapon box gives you a 5th weapon. It doesn't matter when you get this either. It will just equip a 5th weapon, so you can still collect your normal 4 weapons, assuming you're not doing one of the weeklies that makes it so you can't have more than that amount of weapons. Or if you're playing on like the weapon challenges, this gives you a 2nd weapon, in which case it can actually make those ones way easier depending on what you get. However, your weapon does already start out with an overclock when you get this. So that's pretty cool. It is a random overclock, so you can't really do much about that. But this does make it so any weapon can spawn on any class, which can be really, really strong in certain circumstances. And generally, if you get a good weapon, then this one's pretty nice. Like if you get cryo nades, or really any cryo weapon is pretty good in this as a like 5th extra weapon, so that you can just slow things down. You get like the autocannon on this, it's pretty strong, or M1000 is pretty strong, boomstick is pretty strong. You could also get maybe not as strong weapons, but generally you're going to get something good out of this. So I would say the weapon crate is rock solid, especially if you can grab it early on. The only kind of problem that comes up with this weapon is if you're doing one of like the weekly challenges and it lets you pick all 4 of your weapons, and then you get offered this right away and you have a 5th weapon, and then all of your weapons are kind of low leveled, like low level upgrades for each of your weapons, and none of them are getting upgrades and none of them are getting all that strong. That's the only time that this one is generally bad. Then we have our new pickaxe. The pickaxe makes it so you have reduced mining speed by 10%, but it makes it so that you mine through multiple blocks in front of you. I think this is 3 in front of you. So this one is pretty good, because mining through more of the wall means that you could potentially mine up more gold, more nitra. You can potentially hit more loot bugs with this as well. This one is actually pretty solid, and I would probably put it up in rock solid. The only time that you really won't want to grab this is if you don't have high mining speed right away, and maybe there are pretty fast bugs, or maybe you got offered a better artifact overall, but I really enjoy this. Then we've got the new boots. These ones kind of function like the belts do, where once you get hit, then you jump up into the air, and then you come crashing down. If you come crashing down on a loot bug, I would assume that it would explode. I've never actually tested that, but it does work that way in Azure World when you're bouncing on the platforms there. This one is like a more fancy escape than either of the belts. It can potentially be better because at least with the fire belt, there's no guarantee that other bugs couldn't swarm on top of you immediately. and the ice belt only has such long reach that even if you manage to freeze everything in front of you, you still may not be able to run through them because there still might be more of the wave behind them. With the boots, you potentially have a chance of jumping over those enemies, which does help in some instances, but other times it works pretty much the same way as the belts. So I'd put this up into like B tier. I think it's better than the belts overall, but I still haven't really found a great use for it yet. Then we've got the Huli Hoarder Bucket. This one is interesting. So what this one does is it spawns 4 Huli Hoarders when you take this. Now, every Huli Hoarder that you kill does drop something, and this can be upgrades for your weapon, upgrades for your dwarf, or it can potentially be an artifact. Generally low-leveled artifacts. So potentially best case scenario is you get this, and then you get like 4 artifacts from it, and they could be things like the barley bulb juice, the belts, the clipboard, the magnet, things like that. Or you could potentially get some like legendary or epic upgrades for your weapons, in which case that's pretty good. Or maybe you could also get extra nitra and gold, in which case you could actually get a lot of that. This one is situationally good. It depends. I've only really taken it a couple of times. It was the last artifact that I got unlocked, and I haven't used it too much. But every time that I've used it, I've kind of just felt like it was okay. It wasn't something that was amazing, but usually I end up getting to the next stage with more gold, more nitra, so I get more upgrades, or I get a couple more of these like last pick items. Again, if I get like the magnet for free, that's pretty awesome, or some red sugar, that's awesome. There is kind of another problem with this one. If you plan on using the drop pod as a weapon to kill the elites at the end of the stage, you probably don't want to be taking this, because then you only have the last couple seconds to hunt down the hoarders, and they will split off in pretty much every direction. So unless you have a lot of damage and can kill them very quickly, you probably will want to skip that and pick one of the other artifacts that you get offered. Then we've got our tactical cookie here. This one is, I love the name for this one. So this one makes it so when you end the stage, when you get to the drop pod, you are healed 50% of your maximum HP. That is the same as the gold option that you have in between stages to heal yourself. And that's pretty good. That saves you essentially 40 gold in between stages, assuming that you are going to be using it. This one is worse on lower difficulties and better on higher difficulties, since you're just going to be taking more damage on the higher difficulties. On lower difficulties, you can still make some use of this, but a lot of the time you might have just skipped the heal entirely on that and been okay with just collecting red sugar the next stage. That is kind of the other problem with the cookie, is that if you are very strong, then you may not even need it. It's not going to be getting you a whole lot. But if you are struggling, it can potentially save you some extra gold. So I'm going to put it up in a B tier. It's actually pretty decent. I like stacking it with all the food items too. Like, it's kind of fun to have a full food build in this. And then we move on to our last one here. These two are like the fan-made ones from the author who actually made this tier list. I added a couple of the new things here, but yeah, we got like Pepto-Bismol, and I don't remember what the other one was supposed to be. Either way, we've got the 5-leaf clover. So 5-leaf clover gives you more luck. I believe this is 15% more luck, so it's the same as an epic luck upgrade, which is still really good. Or maybe it's a little bit higher than that. Maybe the epic's only 10%. Either way, there's that. And then this also makes it so whenever you re-roll anything, then there is an increased chance of getting more rare items. So rather than just going from the regular rare items, you might get more epic items. That is actually really good. This one is really strong if you get it early on, because this makes it so if you do end up getting like 3 common options, you can re-roll that and you're almost guaranteed to get something that's at least rare all the way up to epic from those upgrades. You might even get legendary stuff. And it makes it so if you can get this from your first drop pod, you're usually pretty set, because this works on every reroll too. So this works on artifact rerolls. You might get better artifacts. And I'm not sure if it works for weapons, because I don't really think any of the weapons count as like epic, rare, whatever they might be. But just having bonuses from those ones is pretty solid. So I'm going to put the 5-leaf clover actually up in Karl's choice. I think it's really good. And this is where I would put all of the artifacts in DRG Survivor right now. Generally, they're quite good. Even the last pick options still have good value to them a lot of the time. Situational stuff heavily depends on when you get it and what your build is, but the rest of the artifacts are pretty solid. Tell me where you place these artifacts in DRG Survivor. I'd love to hear that. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. Hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.